So, hands up if you're interested in what I'm about to say, because it's going to have something to do with leadership. Hands up if you're more interested in the sexy and the naked. All right, so I want to tell you a story. A couple of years ago, my son was 9, and I received a phone call from his best friend's mother. And she said to me, she started the conversation with, "Now, Michelle, I know that if you were in my position, you'd be making this phone call as well." Uh-oh. I had no idea what was coming. It turns out that my 9-year-old son had been showing her son porn sites. And of course my reaction to that was quite strong. Like, oh my God, and bugger, bugger, bugger. And then it got worse, I suppose. It got a little bit worse in that she said, and he's also showing my son, Harry, how he hides it from you. And that was a little bit of a, gee, that's a bit of a worry. So a bit more buggering, a bit more, you know, oh my God. And when I told my husband, of course, his reaction was extreme. It was, that's it, he will never leave the house again. He will never be using that. He will never have a life. You know, it's all over as at this point, okay? And it was a very emotional time. And I had to sit back and I thought, now, I help people in my work when they have these kind of conversations. So perhaps I should consult to myself and my lucky half. So he would be the lucky half. And so I did that, and I said, look, I think we need to wait a couple of days and just think this through. And as I reflected on it, there were a number of things that came out of that for me. One was that I noticed that there was an enormous amount of emotion around this issue. And as I reflected, I realised that our initial reaction, we thought, was about disappointment and anger at our child, that he would possibly think to do this. But when you dig down, it was really about our guilt and our disappointment in ourselves, disappointment in ourselves and the humiliation that we felt in that situation. We had allowed him to get an iPad. He was quite young, but he'd saved up for 6 months to get it. I'd had the, you know, Mummy will be watching what you're doing. Don't do anything on there that Mummy wouldn't be liking. And of course, my husband had been getting around to putting on the net nanny. So a bit of it was about guilt, about the fact that we really hadn't been supervising as well. So there was a lot of emotion stuff going on. The second thing was that I realised that taking that couple of days out meant that we had to be mindfully present. We really had to be mindful of what was really going on, and that our emotions were driving a lot of this, and that in fact this was more about us than it was about him. So that mindfulness seemed to be very important in the process. The next thing is that I realised that we had to take a really objective perspective here. So when you're 9, and as it turned out, your 12-year-old friend says, go and Google, and here it comes, sexy naked ladies, that's the connection, what do you expect a 9-year-old to do? Google sexy naked ladies. And when you haven't put the net nanny on, and when you haven't been, you know, doing the supervising that you should have, that's what he did. Now he saw it, thought it was pretty funny, and thought he'd show his friends. So, you know, taking that objectivity and realising too that what do I expect a 9-year-old to think? Does he realise that it's porn? Does he know what that even is? Does he know what's bad? Does he know what's good, you know? Who knows what's going on? So really stepping back and going, what do I actually really expect here? And taking that objective perspective. The next thing was that we had to test a lot of assumptions. You know, the assumption was that he went seeking this, but that wasn't the reality. You know, his friend said, go and do that. You know, what other assumptions were we making around this whole situation that we had to test ourselves on and get that objectivity? And lastly, realising that was an opportunity for him to evolve his knowledge, involve his wiring, involve his understanding of the world. And we had to sit down and teach him about some new concepts. And we had to, you know, and I asked the question, do you know what porn is? No. You know, but he did know he was doing something wrong because he was hiding it. So really understanding that this was an opportunity as a parent to teach. Now, the word discipline actually means to teach. And this was an opportunity for us to teach, not to punish. And we do tend to, I think, confuse the two. You know, that discipline means that we're punishing, and it's not that at all. It's an opportunity to teach. So when you think about that, there was emotions, mindfulness, objective perspective, testing assumptions, and evolving his understanding of the world and the wiring in his brain. And when you put those together, they spell emote. And I thought to myself, this is a process that I could use with my clients. And I suddenly created the emote control. Like it? So it's this whole idea of saying that, you know, if we could be using this emote control and going through those processes when we're faced with these challenging situations, then we could achieve greater personal productivity. You know, waiting that day or two or that time meant that our response was useful, yeah, not just reactive. And also that personal peace. You know, the sense at the end of that process that I felt that I'd done the right thing by my son, even though I might have stuffed up earlier and not put the net nanny on, but really I'd handled it well at the end of the day. And I like to refer to this as this idea of first world peace, and it's the peace that's inside our heads. And I think that whatever leadership role you play in the world, be it a parent, be it in an organisation, or just being as an amazing human being, having that control over our emotional responses to things and having that objectivity and that capacity of being true and looking for the truth is an amazing thing. So when I thought to myself, this is great, this emote control thing, I'm going to really market that. If we apply it to leadership, I thought, does that mean that leaders could be sexy and naked? And if you think about it, sexy is about being appealing. And I think leaders have lost the ability to be appealing. They're on autopilot. You know, it's what their boss did or what the other person in the office does or what the organisation expects of me. It's not about being able to really get down and understand what's really going on here. And I think that we can encourage ourselves and leaders to be more sexy, more appealing as human beings and individuals in the way we relate and the way we deal with issues and situations. You know, we're in a very privileged world. You know, these things should not be blown out of proportion the way they are. I think also that leadership in particular is being under a bit of a cloak. You know, leaders hide. They hide behind rules. They hide behind conventions. They hide behind, you know, strategies that they've read about, rather than being able to peel back the layers and get to the truth. To be totally naked, to be transparent in the way they deal with people and individuals and situations. So, you know, I think that I see in my clients this whirlwind of demands and deadlines and, you know, terribly challenging situations. But I think that if we could take back that control, if we could use that emote control, if we could assess the emotions that we're experiencing and look for the real ones, not the surface ones, the pretend ones. It's not about the anger with the child, it's my guilt and my embarrassment that's driving my reaction. This is about me, not them. If we can make sure that we practice being mindful, that we're in that moment and we know this stuff's happening and we can stand back so we can take an objective perspective. Let's look for the truth. Let's look at what this is really about. Is it that big a deal? Test the assumptions that you're making in any given situation. There's lots of stuff you don't know until you ask, until you find out what's really going on, and knowing that whatever you do next, wherever you place your attention or place their attention, is going to change and evolve their brain and your brain. So I think that if we can all learn to use our emote control, and certainly in organisations, I think our leaders and our parents who are leading the biggest organisation that we have can learn to use their emote control. And if we can teach our kids to use their emote controls, then I think we can all be much sexier and totally naked. Thank you.
This has been another Metamorphic production.